Pokemon and I have always gone hand in hand. So much so that I was born just 7 days before the first games were released in Japan. As a fateful hint of how this series was going to change my life. In these 26 years, we have shared hundreds, thousands of moments that somehow have contributed to who I am today. Being this small channel in which I try to transmit a bit of the love, fondness, and illusion that I feel for the series, the ultimate materialization of that. Today, in this video, much more personal than usual, I'll share with you some of those moments, anecdotes from my childhood that I treasure and value like few other things. So, I hope you are ready for this trip to innocence. There is a forest near my house where I used to go with my friends since I was a child. We used to play hide and seek, cops and robbers, and also explore looking for mysteries, all kinds of adventures on those summer afternoons. By then, Pokemon was already a central part of my life. When I wasn't playing somewhere or watching anime on TV, I was exploring the vast world of Pokemon on my Game Boy. Unfortunately, we were not allowed to take the console there because of the reasonable risk of losing it, so those two worlds would never meet. Of course not, as it was bound to happen sooner or later. One day I went with my Game Boy Color hidden to the usual forest. The model is important, you see. We spent hours playing and enjoying nature as always, but when the sun was beginning to set and it was time to go back home, everyone was surprised and excited to see that I had brought the Game Boy to that forbidden place. Maybe that feeling is not so relatable in our times, as no one leaves their phone with internet access 24 hours a day behind, but at the time, anything about Pokemon, even games we already knew about, was music to our ears and a special moment. But then, fate would have a twist that would reflect how maybe it was not such a good idea. It was a Game Boy Color without backlight, and being already the last hours of the day, you couldn't see anything at all, so most lost interest and left. But me, and another fan of the series, continued playing for a while against all odds, for the powerful feeling that is Pokemon. I remember as if it were yesterday, how it was one of my endless saves of Pokemon Silver, a particularly early one in which I barely reached the Sprout Tower, and upon reaching the top, the screen began to shake. A character of barely recognizable reddish tones with so little light appeared, said something illegible, and disappeared immediately. Then it was completely dark, and it was time to go back home. But on the way, we talked about what had just happened. We thought about who that sprite of barely recognizable red tones could be, with enough power to make the area tremble and then disappear with some strange technique. The only one who could do something like that was Red, the legendary trainer we had already heard about in the playground, but none of us had encountered yet. We didn't even know what he looked like, hence the quick association. And that's how I got home, idealizing that character even more and dreaming of facing him someday. Getting stuck playing Pokemon as a kid was definitely a thing. A jumble of not reading dialogue, moderate IQ, and exaggerated imagination meant that I was constantly getting lost, and worse, convincing myself that the way forward was infinitely more complicated than it ended up being, like with the ice path. The first time I got there, everything was going great. I had finally discovered that Team Rocket had to be stopped for good so that the annoying dude selling Rage Candy Bar would run out of stock and I could be on my way. That little route next to Mahogany Town, with the nostalgic sense of simplicity, and finally the ice path, the last obstacle of many I had had to overcome before the final gym. I even managed to solve the twisted ice puzzles on the upper floors. Everything was going great until I got to this room. I spent days, weeks, maybe even months sliding around like a fool trying to get to the stairs in the center and move forward, but it was impossible. Something must be wrong. Calm down. I had already encountered similar situations and had managed to advance after all. Maybe some special ice Pokemon could help me, just like water-type Pokemon allow you to cross over the sea? After catching all the available ones in the place, I found out that no. The previous gym was full of snowboarders. Maybe one of them would lend me a pair of skis? Nice try, but no. Since I had no guidebooks at that time, I would have to ask someone for help. But while I was suffering the heartbreaks of the second generation, most of my friends were already in the next one with Leaf Green, so I could not ask for their help. There was only one person I knew who was playing Gen 2 who could help me, a kid a couple of grades older and much more advanced in the game. I was impressed by his unconceivable feats for me at that time, such as having Kanto legendaries in his cartridge and something that I will always remember, 2 Gyarados at a very, very high level on his team. For privacy, we'll call this guy Canteen. After much mental preparation, I asked him for help with the cave, and surprisingly, he agreed. Canteen urged me to leave him my cartridge so that he could beat the dungeon at home while I stayed in the school dining room. As you can understand, I was not happy to give my beloved silver cartridge to anyone, but in desperation I agreed, and tragedy was brewing. For days and days, Canteen was nowhere to be found. When I told my friends, they couldn't believe what an idiot I had been because he wasn't someone exactly trustworthy. In the future, I would confirm it because that same guy would tell me things like that. In the power plant of the second generation, there is a secret passage that leads you to Zapdos. He would trick me more than once in the future, but at that point, I had already given up on getting my cartridge back when here he was, with my game safe and sound in Blackthorn City, saying that he had been sick for a few days. In other circumstances, I would have been angry, but at that moment, I was so happy that nothing mattered. I felt quite stupid to see that the mechanism was as obvious as playing with the stones on the upper floor, but not as stupid as I really was, of course. Soon, with many difficulties, I would defeat the last gym leader, meet my idol again, and face the challenge of the Pokemon League that would end up being just the beginning of even more dreams and adventures. But maybe if it weren't for him, I would have lost heart, abandoned the series forever, and we wouldn't be here today. That's Canteen for you, always in our hearts. But for today's last story, we move forward a bit in the timeline. The beautiful leaf green version finally arrived, and all my friends already had it, but it was gifted to me during the most precious Christmas I can remember. That first adventure through Kanto was one of the happiest experiences of my childhood, full of surprises, challenges, and feelings of all kinds, but what stuck with me the most was what happened after the League. Strangely, like what happened in my first time beating the League in Silver, a new great adventure awaited after the final battle. This time in the Savvy Islands, but unlike other times, there were no obstacles on the way. The advance and exploration of the islands was frenetic. Little by little, the things to do were running out. The remains of Team Rocket, Mewtwo, the League rematch. I even managed to catch all unknown in those mysterious chambers. Ended up floating on my Pokemon on the last of those islands, looking at the clouds. That couldn't be all. The best gift for the kids who played the series back then was the Pokemon magazine, a supplement of another one called Nintendo Action here, and among many other wonderful sections, they used to show information about Pokemon and events that were impossible to normally get. Not only did they mention legendary species that I had not yet encountered, but they also recurrently mentioned some extra islands in the Savvy archipelago. Now I know they were talking about Naval Rock and Birth Island, but I remember clearly the rumors spreading among my circle about an 8th and 9th island. Of course, none of this appeared in any guidebook, nor were there any reliable witnesses or anyone who had achieved it, which would have made any normal person give up, but the dreamer me didn't want to desist. There had to be some way to access all that in-game, and the key had to be in that enigmatic feature, Mystery Gift. This is a function for receiving items and event Pokemon on special occasions by in-game delivery, but under normal conditions it had no use. However, I didn't know that, which made me think that behind that mysterious function there had to be the key to everything. I knew that the phrase "linked together with all" unlocked the feature, so maybe filling out that same form with other words was the key, but that combination had to be very hidden in the game so that no one, not even the guides, would have found it. I spent a whole afternoon trying different phrases, but none of them worked, so I needed a clue, and I could only think of one possibility. Mount Ember, home of Moltres, but that didn't matter at that moment. I recalled how when I picked up the ruby in its depths to fix the network machine, I found several inscriptions with odd symbols that had not appeared in the game again. Investigating, I discovered that it was Braille, and that the large room before the ruby had written the alphabet with the letters in order. I perfectly remember the hours I spent writing down one by one the equivalent of each symbol in my language, feeling like I was getting closer and closer to the end of something great. If I deciphered those words, I would have the winning combination that was going to allow me to get to all those legendary and wonderful places with the mystery gift function. The fact that I had gotten so far in something that no one had even suspected made my heart race like few things in the world, until I finally succeeded in translating the message from the ruby room, and what I didn't expect was that those words had even more importance than I had imagined. Everything has a meaning. Existence has a meaning. Being alive has a meaning. Keep dreaming. Use that power. Of course, after seeing that those were many more words than would fit on the form, my hypothesis about the relationship of that place to the mystery gift fell apart in a second. But instead, it was the first time I felt something of that nature with a video game. It was as if the game was speaking directly to me, as if whoever wrote this message wanted to recognize my worth. Few would take the time to get excited about something like that, to let themselves be carried away by innocence and look for adventures where the rest see trivialities. That day I didn't get Deoxy's Mew or the ticket to a secret island, but I understood the ultimate message of the series, treasure that I still keep and hope to keep forever. What do you think? Did some of these stories of Small Kareem resonate with you? Feel free to leave your own anecdotes in the comments, and if you were left wanting more, I invite you to watch the cool video you have on screen. Be nice.